Ethan Carter never imagined he'd spend his Saturday night crouched in the shadows, concealed behind a pile of hay bales, waiting to catch a middle-aged woman in the act. Yet there he was, flashlight in hand, eyes fixed on the barn door, his pulse pounding with anticipation. The woman he was after, Linda Grayson, was the most insufferable, litigious neighbor in all of Willow Creek County. Tonight, she'd learned the hard way that stealing from a farmer wasn't just a terrible idea, it was a risky one. Just past midnight, the barn door creaked open. A shadowy figure slipped inside, moving with the clumsy stealth of an amateur crook. Ethan held his breath as Linda tiptoed forward, her pricey tote bag swinging awkwardly at her side. She was dressed absurdly for a burglary, stilettos, a zebra-striped coat, and enough bling to dazzle a horse. Ethan stifled a smirk. This was going to be priceless. Linda headed straight for the metal milk tank, muttering to herself about how these farmers don't deserve to hog all the good stuff. She popped the latch and started scooping fresh milk into what looked like fancy glass jars. This wasn't her first rodeo. Ethan had been watching her for a week. He had security footage, timestamps, and even proof of her selling his milk at her pretentious roadside stall, marketed as artisanal, organic, farm fresh. The audacity was unreal. Ethan let her settle in, let her think she'd pulled it off again. Then, with a quick flick of his thumb, he switched on the flashlight, aiming the beam right at her. Linda let out a yelp like a startled possum, dropping a jar that shattered at her feet. Milk splashed onto her designer heels, and she flailed, eyes wide with panic. Well, Ethan said, stepping out from the shadows, his voice slow and deliberate. If it ain't the milk maven herself. Linda whirled around, her face morphing from shock to outrage in a flash. You can't just ambush people like that, she snapped, as if she weren't the one trespassing. I reckon I can, Ethan replied coolly, seeing as this is my barn. Linda's nostrils flared, her hands slamming onto her hips. This is a misunderstanding, she said, her tone oozing fake sincerity. I was just making sure your cows are treated right. As a concerned citizen. Ethan stared at her, then, with deliberate slowness, pulled his phone from his pocket. A few taps later, he held up security footage of her last late-night raid. Funny, he said, showing her the screen. You seemed real concerned about their welfare when you stuffed 4 jars of milk into your Gucci bag last Tuesday. Linda's expression cycled through denial, shock, indignation, and then a stubborn defiance. Milk should be free, she huffed. You don't own nature, Ethan Carter. Ethan let out a low whistle. So you're saying if I strolled into your place and helped myself to whatever I fancied, you'd call that fair? Linda jutted her chin up. That's different. Oh yeah? How's that? Because you're a farmer, and she faltered. I have allergies. Ethan blinked. Come again. Linda straightened, doubling down. I'm lactose intolerant, she declared, which means your cows are discriminating against me by hoarding all this milk. Ethan opened his mouth, then shut it. He was speechless. Just then, as if to punctuate the absurdity, Mabel, his oldest and grumpiest cow, let out a loud, wet snort from her stall. Linda jumped, glaring at the animal like it had insulted her personally. That thing just snarled at me, she hissed. She don't take kindly to thieves, Ethan said. Linda took a step back, her heels crunching on the broken glass. I'm leaving, she announced, reaching for the barn door. Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Here's the thing, Linda, he said, his voice steady but firm. You ain't going nowhere. She froze. Excuse me. With a calm, deliberate motion, Ethan slid the heavy barn doors shut and latched them tight. The solid thunk reverberated through the wooden structure, making Linda's shoulders twitch. You wanted the farm life, he said. Now you're gonna get it. Linda spun around, incredulous. You can't do this. Ethan smirked. Pretty sure I can. Panic flickered across her face. This is illegal. Not more illegal than breaking in and stealing, Ethan pointed out. Linda stomped her foot, as if that might sway the situation. The cows, unimpressed, barely glanced her way. Brutus, the biggest and orneriest bull on the farm, snorted from his corner, his sharp horns glinting in the faint moonlight. Linda swallowed hard. Let me out, she said, her voice jumping an octave. Ethan propped himself against a beam. Tell you what, he said. I'll let you out come morning. Morning. Linda's voice cracked. Yep, Ethan replied, unfazed. You can spend the night getting acquainted with the cows. Might teach you to appreciate 'em a bit more. Linda opened her mouth, probably to scream, but before she could, Mabel let out another booming moo and took a bold step forward. Linda yelped, stumbling back into a stack of hay bales. Ethan grinned. This was already shaping up to be the most entertaining night he'd had in ages. The cows, meanwhile, were just warming up. Linda pressed herself against the barn wall, eyes darting between the animals. Her zebra-striped coat was now more straw than fabric, and her panic was mounting. Ethan stood by the door, arms crossed, savoring every second of her unraveling. Mabel took another deliberate step, letting out a deep, throaty moo that rang through the barn like a battle cry. Linda flinched, her breath short and sharp. She raised a hand, palm out, her polished nails catching the dim light. Nice cow, she quavered. Good cow? No need for trouble. Brutus, looming nearby, snorted and kicked up some straw. Linda's eyes nearly popped out of her head. Oh my God, she gasped. That one's planning to kill me. Ethan chuckled. Brutus don't take kindly to intruders, especially the milk-stealing kind. Linda's head whipped toward him, a mix of fury and fear in her eyes. You can't leave me in here with these beasts. This is animal cruelty. This is... Before she could finish, a younger cow, Clover, trotted over and gave her a friendly nudge with a wet snout. The shove sent Linda staggering back into the hay. She flailed, arms windmilling, and toppled backward with a shrill yelp, her coat billowing out like a sail. Ethan burst out laughing. Well, look at that, he said, shaking his head. Clover's taken a shine to you. Sprawled in the hay, Linda unleashed a string of profanities that'd make a trucker blush. She scrambled up, panting, her face flushed with rage. This isn't funny, she barked, brushing straw off her sleeves. You can't trap me in here like some. A loud, wet splat cut her off. Linda froze. The barn went quiet. Ethan's grin widened. Slowly, she turned toward the sound. A few feet away, a hefty cow had lifted its tail, and a fresh pile of manure hit the floor with a heavy thud. Linda gagged, stumbling back, her face a mask of horror. Welcome to farm life, Linda, Ethan said, slapping his knee. Her fists clenched. I swear, Ethan Carter, when I get out of here, I'll sue you into next year. Ethan wiped a tear from his eye. I'd love to see you explain to a judge how you broke into my barn to steal milk and ended up knee-deep in cow dung. Linda's mouth opened, then shut. She knew he had her there. The cows, oblivious to the drama, started crowding around her, curious about the newcomer. She stepped back, but the barn wasn't big enough to escape their interest. One particularly nosy Holstein, Rosie, leaned in and slurped a long, slow lick up Linda's cheek. Linda shrieked. Ethan doubled over, wheezing. Oh, man, I should be recording this. Linda swiped at her face, livid. That's vile. This is harassment. Let me out now. Ethan shrugged. Not happening. She huffed, spinning on her heel and storming to the door. She yanked the handle. Nothing. It was locked solid. She turned back to Ethan, murder in her eyes. You'll regret this, she hissed. He flashed a lazy smile. Doubt it. Just then, another cow waddled up behind her, too eager to join the fun. With a clumsy nudge, it bumped her forward. Linda stumbled, barely catching herself before face-planting into another steaming pile of manure. She let out a sound, half scream, half sob. That's it, she bellowed, whirling around. If you don't let me out, I'll... She didn't finish. Mabel, the herd's ringleader, chose that moment to up the ante. With a swift toss of her head, she knocked Linda's tote bag off her arm. It hit the floor with a thud. Linda gasped, diving for it, but Mabel planted a massive hoof on top, pinning it down. No, Linda wailed. That's a limited edition Prada. Ethan leaned against the beam, watching like it was primetime TV. Looks like Mabel ain't impressed by designer labels. Linda clawed at the bag, but Mabel didn't budge. She yanked harder, and, rip, a seam tore open. Linda froze, staring at the damage like her soul had been shredded. You, she whispered, glaring at Ethan with venom. You'll pay for this. He grinned. Pretty sure I ain't the one who brought $1,000 bag to a barn. Linda screamed, kicking at a stray clump of hay. The cows, unfazed, went about their business, some chewing cud, others nosing the spilled milk jars. Ethan glanced at the time. It was late, and he was ready for bed, but he wasn't leaving Linda unsupervised until she'd learned her lesson. "Hope you like the company," he said, heading for the loft where he kept spare blankets. "I'd find a comfy spot. Mabel don't mind sharing hay." Linda's horrified look was pure gold. "This isn't over," she muttered. Ethan smirked as he climbed the ladder. "Sure hope not." Dawn crept through the barn's slats, painting the straw-strewn floor in golden light. Ethan stretched in the loft, yawning as he sat up. The animals stirred below, soft snorts, shuffling hooves, and one very distinct, very human groan. He peered over the edge and saw Linda curled on a hay pile, looking like she'd survived a war zone. Her zebra coat was more straw than fabric, her perfect hair a wild mess, and her face screamed exhaustion. "Morning, sunshine," Ethan called, climbing down. "Sleep well." Linda glared at him through bloodshot eyes. "I hate you." He chuckled. "Figured you might." She sat up, wincing. "My back feels like a truck ran over it." "Well," Ethan said, rubbing his chin, "Rosie did sleep on you for a bit. She's a cuddler when she likes someone." Linda's face twisted in disgust as she spun to see the big cow dozing behind her. She leapt up, nearly tripping over her heels, brushing at her coat like she could erase the night's indignities. Ethan ambled over to unlock the doors. Cool morning air rushed in, carrying the scent of dew and grass. Linda bolted outside, gulping air like a freed prisoner. Then she rounded on him. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I'll ruin you, Ethan Carter. I'll sue for false imprisonment. I'll call the cops. I'll—" A truck rumbled up the driveway, cutting her off. Ethan smirked. Perfect timing. Linda frowned, turning to see Sheriff Dan climb out of his patrol rig, adjusting his belt. The man was a wall of muscle, steady, no nonsense. "Morning, Ethan," he said, then arched a brow at Linda's bedraggled state. "Well, you've had quite a night." "Sheriff," Linda snapped, trying to muster dignity, "I need to report a crime. This man kidnapped me and locked me in a barn." Sheriff Dan sighed. "Linda." "What?" she huffed. He pulled a notepad from his jacket. "Before you start, let's run through some facts. 1. We've got Ethan's security footage of you breaking in. 2. There's evidence of you stealing milk. 3. You're trespassing on private land." Linda's mouth flapped like a fish out of water. "Ethan could have called me last night and had you hauled off," Dan continued. "But he let you crash in the barn instead. So before you cry lawsuit, consider which side of this you're on." Linda's face went beet red. Dan raised a hand. "Now, if you're dead set on court, I'll write it up. But that means trespassing charges, theft charges, and maybe animal cruelty, depending on how Mabel felt about you." Linda's jaw clenched. She glanced between Dan and Ethan, then forced a tight smile. "I'll let it slide." Ethan chuckled. "Real big of you." Dan shook his head. "Linda, ever thought of just buying milk like a regular person?" She scoffed. "Why should I pay for something that comes from a cow and belongs to everyone?" Ethan snorted. "By that logic, I should help myself to your espresso maker. Caffeine's for the community, right?" Dan gave her a stern look. "Go home, Linda." Muttering, she stomped to her car, yanked the door open, and froze. Her ruined coat, hay-tangled hair, and faint whiff of manure hit her like a slap. She groaned, slammed the door, and peeled off down the dirt road. Dan turned to Ethan, rubbing his temples. "You really locked her in with the cows?" Ethan grinned. She got what she had coming. Dan sighed. "At least I won't hear her griping about milk prices for a bit." Ethan watched Linda's dust trail fade. "Think she learned anything?" Dan chuckled. "Not a damn chance." That afternoon, Ethan checked his phone and nearly dropped it. Someone had leaked the barn footage, Linda's grand entrance, the cows knocking her around, the milk jars spilling, and the epic tug-of-war with Mabel over her Prada bag. It was viral. Comments flooded in. Entitled Lady Meets Farm Justice. Cows. 1. Thief. 0. Sequel when. Ethan grinned. The internet had taken it from there. By dusk, a knock rattled his door. He opened it to find Linda, arms crossed, looking like she'd swallowed a sour grape. He raised an eyebrow. "Didn't expect you back so soon." She cleared her throat, shifting. "I need this mess gone." Ethan leaned on the frame. "What mess?" She exhaled sharply. The video. The comments. The memes. He smirked. Oh, that mess. She clenched her fists. I'll pay you to take it down. Ethan pretended to mull it over, then shook his head. Nah, it's doing too much good for folks. Linda's eyes blazed. You? Here's a deal, Ethan cut in. Work the farm for a week. No whining, no attitude, just honest work. I'll talk to my pal who posted it. Maybe he'll pull it. Linda's face flashed shock, revulsion, fury, then grudging agreement. Fine, she muttered. Ethan grinned, stepping aside. Great. Start now. Hope you don't mind a little dirt. Linda groaned, trudging past him, her boots sinking into the mud. Ethan watched, shaking his head. This was going to be one hell of a week.